Today I will achieve the impossible. A miracle will happen. I'm going to build a teeny tiny habitat for the kiwi birds. Let the chaos begin. So as I said in the intro already, today we're building for the kiwi bird, or what I would call a sentient coconut. Yes, I did see somebody say that the kiwi bird is named for the fruit, which makes sense, kiwi bird, kiwi fruit. But whenever I look at the kiwi bird, I just think sentient coconut, because it's kind of the same size, same coloration. You just give a coconut some legs and a long beak and you have a kiwi bird. And I just like that imagery. So I'm just going to call it a sentient, well, yeah, sentient coconut, but also just a creation fart because it's just weird but adorable. Just like a platypus. Actually, also kind of like a toucan. Like for me, toucans are also a little bit like, they're not full creation farts, but they're close with their beak that's basically the size of their entire body. I like toucans and ducks. I like most birds actually. Most small birds. Although I still want to eat a penguin. I don't know why. Like some people, like I've heard of like cow tipping and such. I just want to pick up a penguin, like one of the larger ones, and just yeet it. I don't know why. That's just something that I have been thinking of like, what would it be like if you just yeet a penguin? They won't be happy, but again, like the imagery of it. Anyways, as I said, today we're building for the kiwi bird. We're starting off with the tangent. Now I'm trying to get this show just on track again. But this is legitimately just an example of I like the Oceania pack. Mostly because of the animal roster that we got with it. Because I love small animals. Or at least in Planet Zoo, I love small animals. Like if you bring me a small spider, I will freak out. I want large, hairy spiders, not small ones, because to me that just links to, oh, it's a small spider, which means poisonous, which means fuck off. Anyways, other tangent, but I really like getting more small animals, and I know that people will be saying like, oh, the Oceania pack, we only got teeny tiny animals, I want some larger animals, which is fair. I just like that we're now getting just more and more smaller animals to fill in those otherwise empty spots in your zoo. We all have those empty spots when we build a zoo where it's too small for an A tier or S tier animal. Most other animals have just way too large of a habitat size requirement. And then you get a kiwi bird. And it just needs legitimately a cardboard box and it will be happy. So that's basically the reason why I love getting small animals. Just to fill in those empty areas. Like the small animals that aren't your main priority to go for when you go to a zoo. Like nobody, I think... Well, nobody. There's of course some people, but most people don't go to a zoo just for the kiwi bird. They will go to the zoo for like the lion or a giant panda and such, even though giant pandas are to me just myths at most. They're kind of boring. It's a black and white bear, and it's in zoos. Like I've seen that like in real life. In the wild, pandas can be smart, but in zoos they're just stupid. I think we've all seen the giant panda videos of pandas in zoos just not knowing how to do life. Like they will flop over everything. But I know that like in the wild they are more like, you know, independent, self-reliant and such, which of course makes sense. And in zoos they're just blobs. They're living blobs. Anyways, let's go back to the build and move away from the giant panda shades. Yeah, I just really like getting more smaller animals. Because at the start of Planet Zoo, I think we only, if I remember it correctly, had like the red panda and the pangolin, maybe the aardvark. But like those were basically all of the small animals. I will probably forget some animals because I'm primarily a builder, not really in Planet Zoo for the animals. But because I'm a builder, I really love getting small animals because I can finally build small habitats, which is usually, at least when it comes to like foliage and such a more peaceful experience, because I find it very difficult when it comes to like really large habitats, especially like let's say the elephant habitat or the rhino habitat. I found it very difficult to just keep the habitat interesting throughout the entire habitat, because it's just such a large area that's like, all right, how do I keep every inch or every square feet of this habitat interesting? Like, I can't build waterfalls everywhere. And I want to also kind of keep in mind, like, oh yeah, the traversable area, so that all of the habitats I've built are somewhat realistic to the in-game size and animal requirements, or welfare requirements. So it's then very difficult to keep the habitats interesting throughout. So when I'm building a smaller habitat, it's just so much more peaceful for me. It's just like, oh yeah, I don't really have to worry too much about things here because it's tiny. If I want to make a tiny habitat, I need to just have like a small idea of like, oh, this is an interesting feature, and it usually fills up the entire habitat. But yeah, I'm just really glad that with the Oceania pack, we got a lot of smaller animals, just because now we finally have like a, I would say, good enough roster of small animals. I of course won't say no to more, but we now have like a stable roster of like some smaller animals that you can just speckle throughout your zoo in those areas, which otherwise would just be empty. Because before I realized like, oh, the kiwi bird really doesn't require any space, I really thought like, oh, this area, this like armpit of the penguin habitat, which is just going to have like some trees. It's of course going to have a wheelchair ramp because I really like building those nowadays. But I really thought like, oh, what am I going to do with it? And then I thought kiwi habitat. Also, as I keep having to say kiwi bird because as soon as I just say kiwi habitat, I just think of sentient kiwi fruits. My brain is very visually minded, so kiwi bird it is. I think that's probably also the correct name, but like, I can't say just kiwi because then I'm just thinking of the fruit. However, when I say kiwi bird, I also think of a sentient coconut. So my brain is trying to screw me over, but I'm trying to wrangle it into a coherent thought, which most of the times I fail, because by now I have had, I think, 3 tangents. And by the end of this video, I will turn your brain into mush. I've said this in the comments or replied on a previous video of like, yeah, my brain is, you know that SpongeBob gif or meme where his brain is just on fire and there's like 10 SpongeBobs running around, all of the documents and files and such are just floating and flying everywhere, everything is fire, everything is chaos. That's my brain 24/7. Unless you give me a piece of string or a ring. Like lately I've been wearing a bit more jewelry and I just keep like, when I have a ring on, I will just keep turning it. It's just, it keeps my mind occupied. Yes, I don't like fidget spinners. Like I don't really like fidgeting with things. When I let's say play with a ring or play with a piece of string, my mind just goes completely to that. Like I've actually tried just to keep my hands busy while recording these voiceovers, have like a piece of string or something, but I will just completely zone out. So it's not really that like I need to be fidgeting with things, it's just I turn my brain off when I start doing that. Anyways, moving on to the actual build again, because I'm trying to make this voiceover a bit coherent, because we can't all just start walking around with brain goop. So when it came to the fence for the kiwi bird habitat, I only needed to build water fence because we've built all of the fences in the previous build with the penguin habitat. So I could just reuse those fences because, again, that's realistic with a zoo. Specifically if it's like a very designed area, most of the times it's just the design that they put throughout the area, so you will have like same fences and such. But I needed a fence for the door. Now I did think like, oh, it's a kiwi bird habitat, they are flightless bird, we can have a low fence and such. But I don't know why. Well, actually I can kind of explain why, but I don't know like why is this to me somewhat reasonable. But the lower gate to me just feels like it would be like a guest entrance. Like the lower gates, like the lower habitat gates, it just doesn't feel like they are like staff only. Like it just gives me the feel of like, oh yeah, the guests are allowed to open this. So I just can never bring it in myself to use the smaller gates because they just don't look official enough for me. They just feel like, yeah, this is for like if the kids want to wander into this house, that they can. Even though there's I think like a lock on that smaller gate as well. It just doesn't feel official enough. It doesn't feel like it would just like if you open the fan or the door, alarms would go and just go crazy. I know for certain also if I put in a smaller fence gate, there's going to be one Karen who thinks the same as me and just thinks like, oh, my kid can go in there and just open the fence and then the Kiwi birds escape and then we have sentient coconuts walking around Naturalis. Would they just immediately book it? Like, I don't know if Kiwi birds are just like, as soon as they see an opening, they run. Like red pandas. Again, when it comes to the red pandas, I've said this so many times now, but my only experience with red pandas are the red pandas in Rotterdam Zoo, which are escape artists. So I don't know if it's like, oh, all the red pandas across the world are escape artists. If you let the door open, or if the leaves or the trees in their habitat grow a bit too large, and they will just immediately try to escape. I don't know if that's every red panda in the world. I just know it from that one experience. Or one point of experience, which is the red pandas in Rotterdam Zoo. But anyways, back to the actual habitat. I just had a lot of fun with this habitat. It's such a mindless habitat. It's not really, like, it's not an A-tier habitat. It's just a habitat that's just supposed to be there. Not really anything special. Like, it sits next to the penguin habitat and probably on the other side of this Kiwi bird habitat. Just to keep up with the birds. There might be an emu habitat that I've planned on the other side of this habitat. And it's just like those two habitats are going to be like the main shows of this habitat or this area. Or at least compared to the Kiwi bird habitat. So it's just like, yeah, let's do something mindless. It doesn't have to be special. Like the building, like the sleeping area for the Kiwi birds is basically just an upgraded chicken coop. Like, that was legit the idea that I had of like, alright, let's put in a rounded chicken coop. Let's make it a little bit fancy by having that sloping roof on the side. But like for every other intent, it's just a chicken coop. Like, this is a chicken coop in my mind. Which you might think like, Poison, that's a very fancy chicken coop. I'm a very fancy builder. I wouldn't say man, because I'm a train wreck. Like, I just also had nuggets, like chicken nuggets. So I'm very happy. Like, I want to say like, oh, I'm very fancy. And then it's like, yeah, Poison, we can also fucking bribe you with chicken nuggets. And then like a piece of chocolates. Like, you are a train wreck. Or just very easily, what is the word for it? Distracted. That's the word. Yeah. Like, if you throw chicken nuggets somewhere, 9% or 90% chance that I will just go after it. Also, yeah, I like chicken nuggets. It's like a piece of trash, but it's like my piece of trash. Like, chicken nuggets are not like healthy in any sort of way. They are usually complete garbage, like nutrition-wise and such. But it's just like, sometimes you just crave a piece of trash. I wanted to make a joke there, but I was like, yeah, let's not go there. Anyways, moving on from the chicken nuggets and to the canopy that I made over the path and the wheelchair ramp. And yes, every area in Naturalis is going to have a wheelchair ramp, or at least have some form of accessibility, like a wheelchair, like an elevator or a lift or something, just because I like the challenge of having to think of like, oh, how can I make this wheelchair or accessible for people with limited mobility? But also, just I like the idea of like, if you are like with a group of friends and like you are in a wheelchair or walking on crutches or in any sort of way have like limited mobility, that you can do everything that they can. Like, you can go everywhere they can. They don't have to like try and lift you up a stair or something. You can just, oh yeah, there's a wheelchair ramp like a little bit further. Like, yeah, you might have to walk a little bit further, but everywhere they can go, you can go as well without any assistance, which to me is just a very nice thought. And I just really like the challenge. Like, I'm not going to lie and say like, oh yeah, this was completely born out of just me being like good. It was really just out of, I want to challenge myself. That's how it started. And then I started really liking just the thought process of trying to make everything accessible in the, what is the right word? Like, this is another example of like my mouth going a lot faster than my brain, because now my brain has to kind of catch up again. But just, I really by now like the thought as well of accessibility, and that you can go everywhere even if you have limited mobility. Like, you can just go with your friends to Naturalis. If you are in a wheelchair, you can see every animal that they can see. You might have to go a little bit further there, because not every pod is going to have the wheelchair ramps as such, because some of the pods are just a lot older, or just sometimes it's not aesthetically pleasing, because I am still a builder. So again, this is when it comes to wheelchair accessibility and accessibility in general, I do sometimes still go like, oh yeah, this looks better, like the wheelchair ramp looks better here instead of there. So that is still, of course, a thought process that I have to go through of like, all right, where does it look the best as well? Anyways, here's another thing for accessibility. Like, this part of the video is just all accessibility, but I wanted to make like a sign that I could stick on the floor of the wheelchair ramps that I've built so far, but also like the wheelchair lifts and elevators and such, of just like, yeah, this is meant for people with limited mobility. Like, you can use them if you're like tired. You can use the wheelchair ramp if you don't want to take the stairs. But if somebody in a wheelchair comes along, or a crutches, or anyone with limited mobility comes along, you have to give them like the right of way. Kind of like the same idea of like, you can walk on the bicycle paths, but if a bicycle comes along, they will mow you down and will not think twice about it. Now I'm just thinking of somebody in a wheelchair just like pushing a button, and suddenly they go like 50 or 100 kilometers an hour and just mow everyone down on the wheelchair ramp. Again, my brain is very visually minded, so now that I'm thinking about it, I see a kiwi bird on a wheelchair going 100 kilometers an hour, just mowing everyone down on the wheelchair ramp. A complete massacre. And they're just like, oh, that was a little bumpy, wasn't it? No, but it's the kind of same idea for like bicycle paths of like, you can use it, but it is built for a specific goal. In this case, accessibility. And I just wanted to build this. I could have used a sign. Like, some people will probably say, Poison, you could have just made this into a sign and just copied it around. But I wanted to sync it into the road. And if you have a sign, like, you have to like specifically pick the colors of like every road that you want to put this into. And so I thought like, yeah, let's make it a little bit easier and make it out of like the letters in Planet Zoo. So I could just delete the sign surrounding it and then just stick it into the path. Because I like that idea of it just being painted on the actual path. And then finally we're ending off with a lamp, because I felt like this area needed its own lamp. Like, so far every area has its own style of lamps. Like, the Asian Highlands has a different lamp than the African area. The Australian area already had a lamp, which was basically these squares. But I thought that this area just needed something that gave a little bit more of an organic feel. That just gave a bit more vibe of like beachy, wavy. Like, that's the same idea for the canopy that we already built, where just it had to have the idea of like beach and the waves and such. It had to feel really light in a way. And that's also a thing, like, somebody actually asked me like, Poison, how do you do an Australian area when it comes to architecture and such, like a specific style? And most of the time I don't. The only places where I really have a specific style is like the Asian Highlands area and the African area. But when it comes to the Australian area, I mostly have just the ideas of like, oh, organic shapes, a lot of roundness, a specific color scheme, which is mostly like light beige, white, orange, and recently also a bit more turquoise, I think the color is called. or just like this sort of sea blue-ish kind of blue. So it was just like, oh yeah, that's like the idea for the Australian era. Then also looking at like indigenous architecture, but also very modern architecture, and just kind of blending those. So it's not like, oh, I'm picking from like specific actual architecture styles. I'm just picking a lot of different pieces and just blending it all into what might give off the vibe of Australia, or give off that surfer, beachy nature vibe. That's the entire vibe of the Australia area. So it's not really just like, oh yeah, you can legit draw lines from like, oh, this is what Poisonblade and this is something in real life. When it comes to the Australian area, it's a little bit more just vague. Although with the Asian Highlands area and the African area, you can more specifically draw lines from like, oh, this piece of thing or this thing that I've built, oh yeah, this is actually like kind of represented in real life. Like there's a direct line that you can draw. But in the Australian area, it's a little bit more vague because it just draws from a vibe or a feeling instead of an actual architecture style. But anyways, that's going to be it for today. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, throw a coconut at the like button. If you want to see more, throw a kiwi bird at the subscribe button, or yeet a penguin. Anyways, that's going to be it. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye bye.